Welcome back to 16 weeks of SAT with myself, Andrew from Vocabulary Ninja. And this week we are going to be looking at verbs. Previous weeks we've looked at nouns and adjectives. And this week we're going to look at that third, for me, one of the three most important word classes that we can look at: nouns, adjectives, and verbs. And once we've mastered these nouns, adjectives, and verbs, it becomes really easy, in my opinion, to jump off to all the other different word classes and help them make sense. So today's episode is all about understanding verbs and what they do. As I've said before in other episodes, today we'll look at some really simple explanations to start with, followed up by some SATs examples where I'll take you through the different types of SATs questions involving verbs, and then I'll leave you with a few examples to finish with yourselves to have a go at and see if you can spot the verbs in those sentences. So no messing around this week. As before, if you like these videos, please make sure you subscribe. Like the videos, leave me some comments. It's always great to hear the comments and feedback. I know there's classes watching, especially on an afternoon. So yeah, let's get stuck into the content and see if we can understand verbs a little bit better. Let's take a quick look at verbs and better understand them for our SATs. So as we can see, a really simple description of verbs to begin with. And it's really important to understand exactly what a verb is doing. Okay, so verbs describe actions or states, and I think the actions part is normally fairly something that people are very aware of. So because it gets called a doing word. Okay, but as well as that, we have the concept of state, okay, and that is just a state of being. Sometimes we aren't doing anything, but we are alive, we are breathing, we are in the past, we are in the present. So verbs are always telling us what we are doing. So we've got this concept. So verbs describe the actions or states. Okay, so a state of being. Okay, so we've got concepts. Very, very obvious ones are these physical actions. So jumping, walking, running, climbing, bouncing, very, very straightforward and simple. Then we've got actions that might be performed in our head, so things like thinking or imagining, where it isn't something obvious that the character or the object or subject is doing, but it's something that is still being performed. And then things like growing, so this state of existing, or that someone was or had been. So we've got this very, very straightforward process of physical actions, mental actions, and the one that sometimes trips us up, states of existing. Okay, so just being. So let's take a look at some examples. So one thing we want to look out for as well, just before we get into some of the SAT examples, are just these auxiliary verbs and linking verbs. Words like be, have, do, am, was, were, does, are, had, did, etc. Now, these words often crop up in combination with verbs to help them to link the rest of the sentence to the verb in the correct way. So these are very, very common. So again, we've got she was laughing. She laughing being the verb wouldn't make sense. So we've got was, okay, which helps us if it could have been they were laughing. He is laughing. So this is and was and has and were, these linking verbs help us to help the verb to form. And they'll crop up sometimes in questions where it's not an obvious verb like running or jumping. So we just need to be aware of them where they crop up in sentences, okay? And I think when we see the examples, this is why we don't often get lots of SATs examples where we're just circling a verb, because really we have this helping verb as well that can cause confusion, okay? So I'll show you some examples of this in the next few slides. So if we take a first look at this sentence, it's a bit extreme to have to circle 4 verbs. So circle the 4 verbs, again, so that's physical actions, mental actions, and states of being in the passage below. So let's see if you can spot them as we read them aloud. There were hundreds of gulls circling in the sky. They gathered near the dock, searching for scraps. So quite simply, we should be able to spot, hopefully, the obvious ones, which are circling. I'm just going to change my pen type so it's a bit more obvious. So we've got circling, we've got gathered, and we've got searching. Three really, really obvious verbs, okay? They're gathered, okay, so it's an action that they performed. Circling, again, an action that they were performing. And again, searching, a physical action of looking for someone. And again, the one that's going to, that gets people is this one here, of this helping verb, okay? Because the helping verb is really over here, helping the circling to explain. So we've got there were, okay? And it's just this sense of this state of being. They were physically there, but there isn't a verb to actually describe them other than the fact that saying that they were there. There were hundreds of gulls circling in the sky. They gathered and they were searching. Okay, so hopefully that one makes sense. And this is one of those examples where this helping verb is actually being shown within the sentence. Now, that last example was the only example that I could find in the past 8 SATs papers where you had to circle the verb in a sentence. So it doesn't happen very often. It does with nouns and it does with adjectives, but not so much with verbs. And I think before, as I said, we've got this helping auxiliary verb that I think sometimes doesn't confuse sentences. It makes them make sense, but I think it confuses SATs questions. So I think that's why they don't use them as much. And they tend to use these type of questions for verbs where there's options to choose from. So I'll show you a lot of these examples now. Which sentence uses the word book as a verb? So straight away, hopefully in our head, we should be thinking, right, I need to find an example where I'm booking something. I'm performing an action. So I'm booking a place on a seat on the train. Okay, so that sense of booking a ticket, booking your space somewhere, as opposed to the noun of a book. Okay, an actual physical reading book. That's a very different thing. So let's have a look. We decided to book tickets for the football match. Hopefully that one should jump out. I'm likely going to tick this. I'm just going to check the rest. Aaron wrote a book, so we know that's a noun. We've got a determiner here. The scientist's ideas are explained in his latest book. So again, that's a physical book, a noun. And the book club meets and again, we should be able to spot straight away that book club is a noun. It's a group of people together. So we can go back to this one and tick that one. Very simple. 1 mark gained. Let's take a look at the next one. What is the word class of the underlined words in the sentence below? And again, I just thought I'd show this one again so we can see it, that because verbs are mentioned. And with this question, what is the word class of the underlined words? So there's 3 words. We've got drink, swim, and pool. Okay, had a drink. So again, let's read it. We had a drink after our swim in the pool. So hopefully that should be jumping out as a noun, but let's just take a little time just to think about, well, why? So again, we've got here, we've got a determiner or an article before the word drink. Straight away, that gives us a clue that we've got a drink as opposed to drink. So it's not a verb, but we can see how swim as well could be confused as a verb because you can swim, but it was our swim as if it was an event. So that is a noun. It's naming the event, the swim. We've got an article here, in the pool, which is a noun. So we've got 3 nouns, 2 of which could be confused as verbs, but they're not. But again, I just wanted to show you this general setup as this is quite common when verbs are involved. And again, the next question, another one. In which sentence is dance a verb? So again, we know a verb is a physical action or a mental action or a state of being. So we need to think of dance in the sense of dancing, to dance. I was dancing. Whereas you could go to the dance, which would be like the match, the football match, the The dance is an hour-long event that people attend. So that would be a noun. So that's what we're watching out for. Our class took part in an Irish dance workshop. Okay, so that's a noun. After he sprained his ankle, he could not dance. Could potentially be that one. The dance, so again, very, very obvious. We've got the determiner before. So it's definitely not that one because we know the dance involved moving very quickly. Ballet and hip hop are my favorite types of dance. And again, that is a noun, it's naming it. So it's this one here, isn't it? He could not dance, or he could dance if it was the other way around. So this is an action. He couldn't perform this action because it's saying he could not. So we're going to tick this one. And again, a slight variation. This one's more verb form, but it's very, very similar. And I wanted to include this one because I've got a top tip for these kinds of questions. So circle the correct verb form in each underlined pair to complete the passage below. So we've got this passage of writing here that you can see. And we've got one sentence to here, quite a long sentence, and another sentence. So we've got two sentences, but in each area, right, in some instances, the clauses, we've got different verb forms depending on the tense, whether we're talking in past tense, present tense. So the verb form needs choosing correctly. So what you've got to do is circle either is or was here. Now, my top tip, just to make sure that these make sense, is to when you get to the first one, like this one here, is not to just try and answer it straight away. My top tip is to read on beyond it further, just to make sure that we get a sense of the tense of the sentence. So I'll show you an example. William Shakespeare, the famous writer, could be is or was. But if we read on, is or was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564. So that's in the past, isn't it? So we can clearly and be confident that this is was. Okay? Because is isn't wrong, it's just the wrong tense, okay? Because you could say William Shakespeare, this was the famous writer, is born in this, depending on how the sentence was written, that might work. But let's carry on. Was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564 and later will move or moved to London. So again, hopefully we can see that that's London or hear that that's London because again, the sentence is in the past and it's continuing in the past. To London where he will become or became an actor. And again, because this whole sentence is in the past, we're going to he became an actor. And we'll finish off. So notice, even today, we should notice that this sentence is clearly talking about the past, whereas this fronted adverbial here tells us the switch to present day. Even today, Shakespeare's plays are performed or performed around the world. So we're jumping to the present tense and are performed. Okay. So hopefully, again, that little top tip of just when you get to these, just read ahead, see, and then come back to it, and that'll help answer these questions really. What happens is lots of children tend to just make a little bit of a guess here and go, William Shakespeare, he is a famous writer, great, but that's not correct. We need the tense in the sense of the whole sentence. So always read beyond, and that will help you get these questions right. And again, so this question type, put this in your memory bank. We've seen 3 of these examples already, so these are very common and crop up a lot. In which sentence is space a verb? So again, we need to think about space as a noun. I'm going into space, outer space, that's a noun. Whereas the verb, or there is space on the table. Whereas actually we're looking for the concept of spacing things out. Okay, so let's look for that. Make space on the table for the laptop. So space is a noun. It's the name of a thing, isn't it? So if the table's clear, then we have space. There is a space. So that is a noun. Space yourselves out in the hall for PE. So this is a physical action, isn't it? You have to move to do this. This spacing is moving out so that there's gaps in between. So this is going to be the verb. Our new playground has more space for lining up. Again, that is a noun. Space is an interesting science for topic, and that's talking about outer space. So that is the name for it. That is the noun. So we can come back to this one of spacing yourselves out in the hall is going to be the correct answer. And again, we've got another example in which sentence is a plant a verb. In which sentence is plant a verb? So again, just look at this layout for these verb questions. It's giving us words very often. This is the fourth example, very often of words that can be nouns and verbs and possibly sometimes adjectives. And your job in these questions is to decide where it's being used as a verb. So as a noun, a plant is a plant that you would find in a pot. You know, you can see a plant, you can touch it. We need to think about the verb plant as to put something in the ground, to plant a seed, which is the process, the physical action of putting something in the ground. Let's have a look. The recycling plant was closed for the weekend. Now, this one's a bit of a tricky one because mechanical plant is like a site. It's a place with lots of machinery that is known as a plant. So that is a noun. So a bit of a tricky one because children won't be familiar with that. The children plant beans in the school garden. Hopefully we're thinking, yes, I remember to water my plant every day. That is a noun. And the roses were growing in a plant pot. Again, definitely not that one. So we're going to come back to this one. The children plant beans. So the beans are the noun. The planting is the action. So we're going to tick that one and move on. Fantastic. And believe it or not, we've got another one. So these are very, very common. And there must be a reason why the SATs people, whoever they are, those mystical SATs people, why they like these. But if we know that these are going to come up, then we can be prepared. So in which sentence is lock a verb? So we've got the noun of lock, which is a metal lock that you put a key in. And then you've got the process of locking it. Yeah, I need to lock the door. That is a verb. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look. Aisha closed the box and fastened the lock. Again, the clue of the determiner is telling us that's a noun. Make sure, and it's interesting, isn't it? This second option on nearly all of these has been the correct answer. I'm not saying that we should look for that, but I think pretty sure nearly all of these have been the second one has been the verb. Make sure you lock the gate before you leave. So it's definitely that one. I think I need to buy a new bike lock. Okay, physical object, noun, and then the lock. We don't even need to read this one because we've got this determiner here. So it's definitely this one. Very simple. But as I've said, put this question type in your memory bank for verbs and remember that quite often it's this word here. They're going to try and trick you with nouns and you're looking for the verb. And just to finish off, I've got some examples for you to have a go at. So you definitely pause the screen and have a look. But with each of these sentences, even though, as my previous examples show, there's not lots of these, it's still good to have a go and have that discussion. But basically, you can spot here, I've got 5 compound sentences with a conjunction in. So we've got and, but, so, and yet. So because we know what a compound sentence is, where we've got a subject and a verb either side of the conjunction, that each of these sentences will have 2 verbs to spot, one either side of the conjunction. Okay, so have a go at those and discuss with your teacher or adult which words you think are the verbs in these sentences. Well, that's verbs covered this week. Hopefully we have a really good understanding now of what verbs are, how those auxiliary and linking verbs can also crop up, where we just need to be aware of them in some sentences as they're not as obvious as more obvious verbs can be. So it's really important to look out for those and how they can crop up. And again, with those SATs questions, we don't tend to get too many SATs questions where it's just circle the verb. They tend to be set with adjectives and nouns as well, and in lots of different scenarios where we've got to spot the word being acting as a verb. And we've got Merlin helping us out today as well, if you spotted him there. So verbs this week, hopefully covered well. Thinking back to nouns and adjectives, very, very straightforward.
but they are some of the most important concepts we can understand. Nouns, those objects, places, naming, adjectives, adding information to those nouns, and then verbs, normally what those nouns, those objects and subjects are doing within the sentences. So really, really important to master those verbs. Hopefully we've done that this week. Good luck in your SATs when those verb questions come up, and we'll see you in the next episode of 16 Weeks of SATs.